Hello, I am Professor Kino, and welcome to my Office of Cinematic Antiquity. Today we will be talking about the latest Star Wars film, Episode 9. There's not much left to say in the way of an introduction. I mean, who doesn't know what Star Wars is? But just in case, I will provide a little background info for all of those who actually, and surprisingly, have no clue what I'm talking about. Here we go. When Disney purchased Lucasfilm, aka Star Wars, from George Lucas back in 2012 for $4 billion, there was a lot of anticipation about what Disney would do with the property. Obviously, they would work on making more Star Wars films. How else are they going to recoup the $4 billion spent on the IP? So when Episode 7, The Force Awakens was announced, it wasn't unexpected. And when it released in 2015, it made a lot of people certain that Star Wars was in good hands, at least judging by the film's critical praise and huge box office success. And this streak continued the following year with the release of the first Disney Star Wars spin-off film, Rogue One. Star Wars was booming. New episodes and spin-offs and trilogies were announced left and right. But then came the end of 2017, and the release of Episode 8, The Last Jedi. While it received critical praise, and by the end of its run still crossed that billion-dollar mark worldwide, the discussions surrounding the film, and consequently Disney's ownership of Star Wars, became toxic. Because of the risks that the film made, it caused waves and fractured the franchise's fanbase. Suddenly, the trade's narratives about Star Wars became less of Star Wars is exciting and fresh and fun, and more of either Disney is ruining Star Wars or, the counter to this, toxic fandoms are ruining Star Wars. And while this combative discussion was widespread, loud, and important when it was happening, its full impact and relevance was not felt for another 6 months. Cue May 2018, aka the release of the second Star Wars spin-off film, Solo. While some naysayers were loud about boycotting the film as a diss to Disney for The Last Jedi, the trades and probably Disney itself didn't believe the seriousness of these statements until Solo bombed at the box office and received middling critical praise. Something was definitely up. Was it just a fluke? Well, when Galaxy's Edge, the Disney Star Wars theme park, opened up in 2019 and didn't attract the intended amount of visitors, at least until its latest ride just opened a few weeks ago, it kinda proved that there was indeed an issue. Something was definitely amiss with Star Wars, and Disney noticed. It quickly dropped a lot of Star Wars projects it had been prepping and focused nearly all of its energy on the final planned movie of their episodic trilogy instead, Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. And so, because of the state of the franchise at the moment, there was a lot riding on this film. It needed to connect all the various plot threads of the previous 2 episodes, fill in missing puzzle pieces, tie up loose ends, connect to the saga as a whole, conclude the entire 9-episode saga, win back the loyalty of the franchise's less than enthused fanbase, satisfy the fans that are still loyal to the brand, and be a good movie to boot. So, do I think The Rise of Skywalker succeeded? Premise. After narrowly escaping the First Order, now led by Kylo Ren, the Resistance, aka Leia Organa, Poe Dameron, Finn, Rey, and company, continues to search for support in their never-ending struggle to bring freedom to the galaxy. However, when a mysterious transmission from an ancient, powerful, and wholly evil entity grabs everyone's attention, things get kicked into overdrive as Kylo Ren seeks out with the intent to destroy this new threat to his reign, Rey begins to learn more about her puzzling past, and the Resistance realizes that they must act fast in order to save the galaxy from imminent destruction. Long story short, it's fine. The biggest flaw I can say about this film is that it tried way too hard to fulfill all of its expectations. So instead of succeeding in accomplishing a few of its goals well, it ended up attempting all of them to middling effect. The Rise of Skywalker is so self-conscious about checking the boxes and playing it safe that it becomes a little frustrating. It clumsily shoehorns in fan service, retcons big complaints that moviegoers had regarding The Last Jedi, and sloppily ties up the new trilogy's plot threads in a way to connect them to the franchise as a whole. Let me break it down piece by piece, and I will end up getting slightly spoilery here, not with specifics, but still. First, fan service. Not only are classic characters of the franchise just kinda added into the film occasionally, most of the time their inclusions feel forced. For instance, one classic character is brought back for this film who wasn't in the previous 2 films, and he just kinda appears and then doesn't do much of anything. It's clear that he was just included for fan service, and not for a specific reason imperative to the narrative. I mean, it is nice to see him, but it feels wholly unnecessary, and as I said, forced. And this is even more noticeable with the film's primary villain, who everyone who's seen the trailer should know about. Despite having been pretty definitively defeated in a previous film, he just kinda comes back and is like, hey, I'm back 'cause reasons. And if I didn't know he was gonna be in this film going in, I'm sure it would have been very jarring. He's just kinda there, has an unexplainably massive and destructive force at his disposal, and explains it all through force magic? Like, not everything always needs to be explained, but the reveal of this character, which happens very early on, feels so forced and so out of left field and so ridiculous that it feels weird. And again, it's not like I was annoyed that I got to see him again. He is a cool character, but the reason for him being in this film is so obvious. He was shoehorned in as some fan service and as an easy, unearned, and forced connection to previous films. Next up, the film handles many of the events and revelations of The Last Jedi in weird ways. Not only are many of that film's new plot threads and characters just dropped or unceremoniously pushed into the background, but a lot of the big reveals of The Last Jedi are just changed in a few lines of dialogue. Who the heck was Snoke? Oh, he was just yada yada. Cool, moving on. Rey's lineage? Oh yeah, we were just kidding. It's actually so-and-so. And on the list goes. And while once again the reveals aren't bad per se, they are so obviously course corrections that were made in a panicked state as a desperate way to quickly gain back fans who shunned the brand after The Last Jedi. And lastly, the film's sloppy wrap-up of the trilogy and franchise so far as a whole. Because this new trilogy didn't really seem to have a specific trajectory even after the first two films, The Rise of Skywalker tries to simultaneously set up the point of the trilogy, show the endgame, and wrap everything up. And if that sounds like a lot, then you're right. And while the film chugs along at a manageable enough pace, the first act, and maybe even first act and a half, is very jumbled. It quickly jumps from admittedly cool-looking location to location, from character to character both new and old, and introduces MacGuffin after MacGuffin for our characters to obtain or reach. And this, while I understood the general idea of what was happening, left me feeling a tiny bit overwhelmed and a little bit uninvested in what was going on. Not bored, mind you, just uninvested. So because of this, when the film reaches its final act and it just becomes a big old battle, it's cool, but the stakes don't feel as huge or exciting as they should have, being that this is the final confrontation at the end of this trilogy, and the end of the saga so far. Again, like with my previous 2 points, this doesn't mean that the jumbled plot is bad, it's just fine, and feels like it's the product of a studio walking on eggshells and checking off boxes. Thankfully, however, the whole film isn't like this, and at its core, The Rise of Skywalker is still a Star Wars film, and so it has everything that comes attached to that. It has cool planets, great production design, fun space battles, entertaining characters, including one particularly new one that stole the show, Babu Frick MVP, great acting to support these entertaining characters, and some epic lightsaber fights. So yeah, this latest Star Wars film is still a Star Wars film, and that's always fun, but it spends way too much time playing it ridiculously safe, checking off boxes, and trying not to anger any new fans, whilst sucking up to the angry ones. Consequently, in the end, while The Rise of Skywalker is still a fun Star Wars romp, it is a bit unsatisfying as a conclusion for not only Disney's first trilogy, but the whole 9-episode saga as it is. Thus, I would recommend this film to you if you are a casual fan of the franchise and just want some nice Star Wars fun, but I would not recommend it if you are against this new trilogy or simply not a Star Wars fan yourself, because Rise of Skywalker doesn't really do a good job at either fixing the problems of this new trilogy, or offer anything new to set it apart from the rest of the franchise's films. Thanks for watching, I hope you liked it. If you did, leave a like. If you want to add anything, feel free to leave a comment. If you want to see more, please subscribe. Until next time, I am Professor Kino, and I look forward to our future discussions.